All right, so let's start this over for those folks who came in after my intro. Welcome, everyone. My name is Angie Abreu. I am the Executive Director of Dominican Writers Association, and today is the first day of honoring Dominican Ancestral Voices through storytelling, a genealogy workshop. We're going to be here for 6 weeks. For those of you who signed in for the 6 weeks, we're going to be here for 6 weeks. Um, Connecting our Dominican writers and community members with cultural heritage through genealogy, storytelling, and multimedia. Okay, this workshop is being led by Jasmine Cateri Rivera, who is a writer and genealogist specializing in Dominican genealogy. Her literary work has been published in Rigorous Magazine and DWA's De Eso No Se Habla anthology. Jasmine has conducted genealogical research, interning at the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute, and more recently as an assistant on a historical fiction project with a Harvard professor and author. She is also a contributor to the NYPL LibGuide, an introduction to Dominican genealogy, developed in collaboration with genealogy librarian to assist researchers in exploring Dominican heritage. Also passionate about uncovering and preserving family history, Jasmine has guided many individuals on their genealogical journeys. She is a recent graduate of Harvard University Extension School and is excited to share her expertise with you all. We also have Gerald Lopez, who has spent the majority of his childhood and many summers in San Francisco and Macorís, where his passion for history, genealogy, and palo music began to take root. His interest in history and genealogy was sparked by conversation with his elders, listening to and remembering their stories. During celebrations, he learned to play palo music from his relatives, which became a significant part of his cultural experience. This blend of history, genealogy, and music grew into a deep passion, eventually becoming a hobby and a support to his career in information security. Today, Gerald runs a genetic genealogy consulting company called Busca Family, where he helps others discover their roots in the art. In addition to his work, he continues to play music for those who wish to celebrate his heritage. This is how I met Gerald about a month ago at an event at Lehman College where he was playing palo music. And he came and introduced himself and said, I'm the genealogy guy for your workshop. So, all right. I am now going to remove myself from here. And I am going to leave it to Gerald and Jasmine.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. And if you're taking the entire workshop every Friday for the next 6 weeks, we wanted to start off with introductions from everybody if you're comfortable. If not, it's okay. By the way, I live in Puerto Rico. This is normal here, so enjoy. If you want, if you're more comfortable with just chiming in, go ahead. If you want, go ahead and use the raise your hand option and we can just call on you individually. Paid actor, that's true. Yep, you could just tell us your name, what you do for a living, and if you have a work in progress, anything that you're working on, if you want to start with that.
I'm going to call people out. Go on, Roseanne.
Good evening, everyone.
And then you, Angela.
I'm Roseanne Santos. I am born and raised in the Bronx. I'm not working on anything in particular. However, I did take a class that kind of sparked my interest with DWA, which was the solo project with Andres. And that I took that because I'm a public speaker and I wanted to learn a little bit more about the performative aspects of being on stage. And then I also submitted an essay for the Bronx Memoir Project, which was a 6-page memoir essay about my experiences with COVID. And so I don't know, how they say there's an acting bug? I think I caught like a writing bug. And genealogy has always been a part of my interests in life. I am the family genealogist unofficially, but I have no training. I just know the chismes. And, you know, and I have a history degree. I have a master's in history. So all of that together, I'm kind of the one that keeps all of that information. And I would love to be, you know, better at all of it. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to the next 6 weeks.
That's awesome. So you're
Angela?
the family historian, right?
On some level, yes.
I'm
How about
next.
you, Angela? Yes.
Hi, I'm Angela Arias. I am the author of Half a Century Ago, which is my life as a child, a Dominican child immigrant in the 1970s in the Bronx. So I'm a retired teacher, high school teacher. I taught for 34 years the writing process in AP Spanish. And like Roseanne, I am the family genealogist. I know all the stories simply because I'm the oldest in the family and I had to fill out everybody's forms. So I know everybody's date and everybody's stories because of all the forms. I've been filling out forms since I was 10 years old. So that's me in a nutshell. Oh, I live upstate New York, so I'm in Albany.
What about you, Sandy?
Hi, my name is Sandy Jimenez. I'm from Queens, New York. I love writing, but I wouldn't say I'm a writer. I'm more of an educator. I work in supporting schools around college and just general post-secondary planning. I started doing genealogy during COVID. Um, I started a family tree with my son, who's a high school student. I'm a mom too. I have 2 kids. My son's the oldest. And we started doing a family tree on Ancestry, and that bug bit hard. I've been going at it so hard and just writing little things for my family on Facebook because they're all over the place and they kind of like it and I kind of like it too and bringing people together and learning more about folks. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on, and I'd love to write something longer than a Facebook post. That would be awesome.
Thank you. Princesa.
Hello, I'm Princesa. I work by day doing mostly data entry, hunting for more than that. So if anybody wants my CV, you know, let me know. But when I'm not doing that, I've been trying to condense my master's thesis into a paper. So I'm writing that. I'm attempting to write a memoir prose book type of situation. We'll see where that goes. And I'm not really like a genealogist kind of a person, but I love history. I feel like as a second gen Dominican, it was always a way for me to sort of contextualize myself as not just like this random dot in the universe. And my family history is very weird. We were a really small cluster of people. I think my grandmother was more like the matriarch, but she died when my mom was like 16, and her mom was a bit more isolated and like kind of alienated from their family. So there's a lot of like missing pieces. Not a lot of people are very well connected. So it's kind of like one fragment of a story of another story and a third story. So this is like my chance, I think, to kind of maybe connect those dots a bit better and make sense of the kind of ideas and rumors that we all just are speculative of at the moment. So
Thank you. Maricel.
Hi, I'm Maricel Goris, and a Dominican, born in the Bronx, live in Massachusetts, and I'm currently working on a memoir. And I actually met Angela. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Last month at the Latinx Storytellers Conference in New York. And
Oh, you guys won.
yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
My notifications reach people. I'm happy.
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. So my memoir is about, yeah, the intergenerational legacy of trauma, but through its estrangement that happens between mothers and daughters in my family. So we have some very interesting dynamics that happened since pre-Trujillo, and I'd really like to know more about that history. And by day, I am a school district administrator. So I have a very busy schedule, but really enjoy writing and have jumped with both feet into writing this memoir.
Thank you. Belle?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Ah, it's so cool. I've been following Dominican Writers for such a long time, since you guys started. So really thrilled that you guys are having this, and that I can participate as a former New Yorker who now lives in freaking Cleveland, Ohio. Things happen. Dominican on one side, Puerto Rican on the other side. I work in economic development. I have a consulting business, and then I also started a Women of Color and Community and Economic Development nonprofit, like a decentralized ERG for Cleveland. Why I'm here, love to write, love stories, and just kind of, I mean, Dominican history is fascinating. I really identify as someone of the diaspora, so like understanding how we've come from other places and mixed and intermingled. I did ancestry.com years ago and want to like find the real facts. I feel like that's just like one half or maybe like one aspect of genealogy. And I'm really interested in like the real genealogy, or I don't know. I want to find more information and understand more about genealogy. So really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Lorenzo. I am a research administrator, and I'm interested in taking this course because I administered a department that does human genetics. And so I was interested in the scientific portion, but science can only go so far. And I thought this course could help explain the cultural history behind my Dominican ancestry.
Beautiful. Virginia?
Hello, I'm excited to be here too. I'm a researcher, an academic, and educator, and I'm actually on sabbatical working on a project about land inheritance in the Dominican Republic. So yeah, so I've been there. I go to the Dominican Republic very, very often. This year I've been there, I think 2 or 3 times already, and I'm going back. And so really looking at what we inherit besides land, but also some of the conflict that comes with that. And so really happy to be here and to hear from everybody. Very exciting to learn and hear people's stories.
Virginia, you a John Jay alumni too? Yeah, so am I. Nice. Okay. Nabil.
Hey, yeah, Nabil. I'm born and raised in Washington Heights. I live in upstate New York. I'm a little south of you in Albany over there. I'm in Rhinebeck in Dutchess County. Yeah, I'm an actor and I'm a screenwriter and a dad. My son is 3. I'm lucky I get to be at least a part-time stay-at-home dad now. I was full-time for a while with my partner. I'm taking this course because my hopes of being able to learn more about my ancestry in a real way, I had given up on that a long time ago. Similar to, I can't forget who it was earlier, maybe it was Princesa, but like there's a lot of gaps and a lot of reasons for them, and I didn't think I could get answers to those. I'm the youngest. I heard someone say they were the oldest. I'm the youngest, so I missed that. No, everybody stopped explaining it to me. They just assumed I knew everything. And so there's people in my family, I don't even know what their real name is. I'm like, oh, that's that. Oh, that's her. Okay. You know, like there's so many gaps. So when I saw this, it was like, this is exactly what I wanted, is a little help kind of getting a realer picture about, you know, my knowledge just ends at like my grandmother and my grandparents. It's hard to get past that. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Naveen. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Roberto, you there? Did you walk away?
No, I'm sorry, y'all. I was like cooking dinner.
No lo queme, no lo queme.
Para que no me vean con los platos y la vaina. Yeah, a lot of my work is about doing like genealogical research. And I remember attending a workshop that Jasmine had done in the past through Dominican Writers. Oh, I think it was like an Instagram Live, right? Maybe it was an Instagram
the
Live.
Instagram conversation we had.
Yeah, and it was so dope, and I learned so much. And you know, it's still challenging to navigate sometimes some of the databases and etc. So whatever chance I can get on to learn a little bit more, you know, I'm excited to do that. And shout out to Jasmine, because from then to now, like the journey continues, and that's so exciting to watch. So I just want to say that as well. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
Awilda.
Hello. So I'm in Washington State. I'm a clinical social worker, and on my off time, I like to do family trees, genealogy, Native American and Dominican. And so I found that on Ancestry, I've hit a lot of roadblocks. And so I'm hoping to find some new resources to help extend my research that I'm doing.
Nice. Thank you. And no, we have two more. Nova.
Hola, hola. My name is Nova Karina Lucero. I'm from the Bronx, New York, también, San Pedro Macorís. And my family's from San Pedro Macorís. And I am working on family tree with my bisabuela, who's 98 years old, and my prima. And so that's why I'm here. I'm so excited.
Nice. Thank
God
you.
bless.
And last but not least, Dr. Tejada.
Hey y'all, I'm Diana or D, and I'm in DC. I'm originally from Brooklyn. My family is from the Campo in Puerto Plata, Gualete, and Guananico, to be specific. So
What?
deep in the
We might be
mountains.
family.
Huh?
My family is from Guananico.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to talk more because I need to, which is why I'm here. Because you know, the dirt roads, you know, se va la luz todavía. Like there's just a lot that then contributes to like the gaps that I'm seeing, and like especially on my dad's side, so the family that is from Guananico, most of the men were the ones who died. So like my great grandma's still alive, my grandma's still alive, my dad died young. So it's just like there's something there, right? But also that means that then having the knowledge is also very limited. And then for my mom's side in Gualete, then it's like, hey, most of those things were written by hand, and somebody has to find that book to be able to find it. Like it's just too much. But I'm a high school English teacher by trade at this moment. And this is mostly for like personal reasons and exploration. A lot of my friends are also like IFA practitioners. So the talks around ancestral veneration and what it means to connect with our ancestors comes up a lot. So I really want to get deep in my bag, you know, and just learn a bit more. And figure out where I can look, because everyone's like, go use ancestry.com. I'm like, yo, it's not that easy when your family is from the Campo. Like this could be many Apolinardos from Guananico. Like, I don't know which one it is. I don't know. So that's why I'm here today.
Nice. Thank you so much. All right, Jasmine, everybody introduce themselves.
And thank you guys so much for taking the time to do that. Just to give you a tidbit, I started off on my own genealogical journey, trying to figure out where I fit in as a Dominican. My grandmother never really shared a lot. We were very disconnected from our family history as a whole. And that's what really ignited my journey. So I can relate to a lot of you here. And don't worry, because this course is going to help you discover those parts that you feel that are missing. So give me 1 second while I set up for our first slide. And I'm going to turn my camera off for this portion. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So I think based on a lot of the commentary in the introduction, I kind of have a feel of what everybody thinks genealogy is. And we're just going to start with a simple definition. And at its
Jasmine,
core,
Jasmine,
yes.
let me interrupt you. When you hit share, it has your photo at the bottom of the presentation, so it may block some stuff.
Okay.
Make sure you don't pick that option when you share. Try it again.
How is that?
There you go.
Yep.
Perfect. It's
All
perfect
right.
now.
Okay, good. Sorry, guys. Okay, so so genealogy is the study of family history through tracing the origins of our ancestors. And before we dive into how exactly we trace our ancestors, it's important to recognize that genealogy is more than just names and dates. It's about understanding the past to better understand ourselves. So people embark on their genealogical journey for many different reasons. And whatever reason brought you here today, our goal is to equip you with the tools to accurately and successfully trace your Dominican ancestors. And while our focus will be on genealogy for writers, the principles and foundations we'll cover will apply to anyone, whether you're a writer or just looking to expand on your family tree. So how do we trace our ancestors? We look for clues wherever, and I mean absolutely wherever we can find them. Sorry. Most often we're extracting data from records and documents like the one we have here. This is an 1837 birth record for Luis, born in Santo Domingo. And I'm not going to go into much detail about this specific record now, as you will have the chance to see how we genealogically dissect a record later on in this lecture. And we can gather information from newspaper clippings, like this announcement of an aviso de fines de divorcio, a notice of divorce proceedings. And in this example from around 1970, Manuel Corniel placed an ad that includes his address, his attorney's information, attempting to elicit a response from Maria Sinclair, who is his estranged wife. And we can use that word estranged here because Manuel had to resort to placing an ad in the newspaper to notify her that he was filing for divorce. So here we have, at the time, Maria was living in the Bronx while Manuel was in Santo Domingo. And this particular ad appears multiple times in the same newspaper, likely in compliance with legal requirements for divorce notification. So it's easy to imagine that Manuel might have gotten some sort of satisfaction from publicly airing out their business, and in a nice way to put it, basically putting Maria on blast that, hey, I'm divorcing you. So newspaper ads like this and others containing different topics or stories offer valuable genealogical information and can provide context for family stories.
So that newspaper clipping, like, how is she supposed to know from New York if it's posted in DR?
Exactly. Typically, I know that here, if you can't find the person that you're trying to divorce, you would typically place an ad in the newspaper. or in more modern times, post something on Facebook maybe. I'm not sure how accurate that is. If anybody is like a legal specialist, they can verify that, but I think that's what is happening here.
Yeah.
So photos can be hidden gems. You may find an old family photo with writing on the back containing a name, a date, who that photo might be dedicated to. Especially if they're sending it to friends, a family member, or even a lover. All of that is valuable information. And not to jump too far ahead in the workshop, but this is a form of multimedia that you can attach to your family tree, just like photos of records, et cetera, that can really enhance your family story. And just a disclaimer, putting a face to a name is not an easy task, but it's not entirely impossible. Your likely source is an elder that has held on to such photos. And there are other methods of finding photos, which we'll touch upon briefly later on in the coming weeks. And just to share a tidbit, this image is of Manuel de Jesus Garcia, who has popped up in my own family tree. He's the twin brother of Dominican historian Jose Gabriel Garcia. And together they founded Garcia Hermanos, which included a library, a bookstore, a printing and publishing company, I believe the first ever in the country. And you will see the name Jose Gabriel Garcia again when we go into the digital archival research later on in this workshop. Now, some people might have mixed feelings about visiting an old cemetery, but visiting an old cemetery can be very valuable to your genealogical research. These visits can uncover information and reveal unknown ancestors that records might have missed. And cemeteries often hold generations of families buried together. These are referred to familial plots. And the staff there may have additional details, such as who's paying for the plot, etc. And headstones in particular can provide key information, such as birth and death dates and family connections. And and whether or not an individual was a veteran. This one, for example, Por fin, while it's a bit morbid, it's certainly creative, though doesn't seem genealogically helpful. It gives us a glimpse into the person's sense of humor or maybe the family's attitude toward death. And who knows, the cemetery workers might have more information on this plot. While it's not likely you'll find something quite like this, it serves as an example of how unconventional, we'll call it a source, can offer insight. And when you do visit older cemeteries, you may come across unmarked plots. And again, you would just speak to the person in charge managing the day-to-day operations. And in my case, the individuals that work on the actual grounds of cemeteries tend to know more than those who work in the offices. So you just never know. And last but not least, thanks to modern technology, we can now use DNA to uncover connections to our past. And by analyzing DNA matches through whichever testing company of your choice, normally 23andMe and Ancestry, we can discover relatives we never knew existed. And that can, of course, lead to some unexpected surprises, depending on the circumstance. But it also gives us a clear picture of where we come from and how we're all connected. And in fact, there's a running joke in the genealogy community that in one way or another, we're all cousins. And there's so many more examples of sources that you can use on your genealogical journey. And we've only briefly gone over the ones that are more common approaches in genealogy research and its relevancy specifically to research for Dominican Republic. Every country is different, and the methods or approaches you take in attacking your research will vary because of it. What I really want everyone to take away from this introduction is knowing that genealogy is both an art and a science. And this is something that has been debated, but however, I contend that the art lies in the stories that we uncover, the connections that we make, and how we decide how we choose to preserve our family legacies. And the science comes from the methods that we use, researching documents, analyzing DNA, and piecing together historical evidence. Not only that, but we're conducting contextual research, perhaps mapping out our family migrations and documenting personal stories we collect from our living relatives. We will be blending these two, the art and the science, so that we can reveal our family's historical narratives and anchor it in a verifiable past. So I'm going to check in with everyone. How is everybody doing?
I'm feeling kind of goofy with all the pictures, I'm not gonna lie.
Explain it.
I feel like maybe because, like seeing little things like the por fin, or just like thinking about it in a personal way, and also in like relating to like the greater Dominicanness. I feel like sometimes, you start seeing like different patterns that come through, or like, sometimes you think a sense of humor is like, oh, it's just your weird family. It turns out it's like very cultural. So it's making me feel kind of giggly, I guess.
Yep, and that's fine. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Well, more of a comment. I'm going to DR in February, and I feel like just in the half an hour, 45 minutes we've been together, I have this whole list of all the questions I'm going to ask my uncle who's picking me up from the airport. And we're going to go take a visit to La Vega, which is where my mom's family is from. And I'm just like thinking of all the stuff. Now I want to go visit my family's crypts and take some pictures. So this is a lot of really great information to chew on and prepare for my trip, right? Because those trips go so fast. So I feel like now I have a little agenda.
And that is what this first class is going to do. It's going to give you the foundations on how you can attack your research. And I like using that word, attack. And I apologize for background noise. I am a single mom of 4 very young boys who should be in their rooms being quiet right now. So next slide. So moving forward in our genealogical journeys, we will be applying the genealogical proof standard, also known as the GPS. And we don't expect anyone to rush out and purchase this book at all. This is mainly a source for those conducting professional genealogy. Instead, we're going to be providing you with a professional framework for researching your family trees based on this standard of practice. And we'll be adapting the GPS to fit this writer's workshop specifically. It'll guide you and everyone in ensuring that the stories that you uncover are rooted in solid research, and that there's accurate documentation and thoughtful analysis. This approach we've developed also allows us to build a reliable foundation for our family narratives while embracing the creativity and storytelling. So if you want, you can go ahead and take notes, or you can look back at this video later, take notes later. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the first one. And that is reasonably exhaustive research. It will provide the foundation for your writing. Reasonably exhaustive research is just a phrase that means you are searching beyond names and dates. You're exploring all, and I mean all, available sources of information, whether that's like records we saw previously, photos, a will, a court case, whatever you have available to you that can give you information about your ancestor. It's all part of that reasonably exhaustive research. We're gathering as much information as we can from what's available at the time. And I emphasize at the time because new information can always surface later. So we must stay open to revisiting our findings. And most importantly, if we don't search thoroughly, we risk leaving important parts of the story untold. So the overall goal with reasonably exhaustive research isn't to just consult 1 or 2 sources. The more sources you explore, the more accurate and reliable your family history will be. Complete and accurate source citations is a must. This is a rule. There's no exceptions. So whether you're writing nonfiction, a creative post, a blog post, or even compiling a family history Bible, citing your sources is crucial. And one important reason, it builds trust with your readers, no matter the audience. For creative pieces, in-text citations might not always be necessary. However, if you're considering publishing, it's a good idea to keep record of your sources, as publishers or even fact checkers may require that information down the road. You just never know. It's better to be safe. We'll dive deeper into that in the coming weeks. And this doesn't just apply to documents or other tangible sources, we'll say. It applies to oral histories and family stories as well. So documenting the origins of these stories is equally important. And we have an example citation here on the slide. For example, interview with Abuela, conducted by writer on January 1st, 2024 in Bronx, New York. So, and I'll also add that when you are conducting your own research, you may encounter other sources as well, like genealogies that lack proper citation and only provide names and relationships. And I will give a warning to treat such sources with caution and always verify the information before incorporating it into your work or your family tree. That goes for public family trees you may come across on Ancestry or Family Search. That's something we'll go into more detail later. I won't go into that right now. But just remember, for this, meticulous citation and record keeping are essential, especially as you move into the next steps of your research journey. 1 minute, please. Thank you all for your patience. The next step on your genealogical journey is analysis and correlation of the data you've collected, which is really just a fancy way of saying that you're trying to make sense of it all. This is the step on your genealogical journey when you've done a considerable amount of research, you've gathered your many sources, hopefully, and now we're at the point where we're just trying to make sense of it all. And the way we do that is through analysis and correlation. So for analysis, we're critically evaluating each piece of evidence, each piece of information gathered, and looking closely at the details. Then we're taking those details and we're going to correlate or cross-check and compare with other sources of information related to that specific ancestor. Is the date of birth on a baptismal record the same as the date of birth listed on the death record? Are the parents' names listed for one child born in 1888 the same on their marriage record? And as you conduct your analysis and correlation of your sources, you will begin to identify patterns, connections, and of course, come across the inevitable contradiction, which we will go more into in the next slide. But nonetheless, analysis and correlation helps us understand the quality of the evidence or the data that we've gathered, and helps us connect the dots to uncover a fuller story. And we're gonna dive deep into resolution of conflicting evidence. I apologize. It's inevitable in genealogy as a whole that we come across sources that don't quite match in regards to information about an ancestor. We gave that example in the last slide about the birth date. So, for example, one document shows a birth date in 1882 while another listed in 1884. In some cases, it can be a decade off, or perhaps the name is spelled one way in one record, but the ancestor decided to change their name on their own accord in another. But more likely, your ancestor just did not care about spelling, nor did the people recording their vital or church records. When this happens, it's important to not get discouraged. This is all part of the genealogy process, and our goal is to resolve this conflicts by carefully evaluating each piece of evidence to determine which is more credible, which is more likely. For example, it is more likely that the baptismal record So it's more likely that the baptismal record in this case is more credible because the baptismal record was recorded on the date or the year that's dated, which is 1882, rather than the year of birth that's listed on the death record. So the closer, the main takeaway to this is the closer the sources to the actual event, the more likely it is to be accurate. And the last part is my favorite part, your written conclusion based on sound reasoning, AKA we're gonna label it your written work. In the context of this workshop, this is where all of your hard work, the research, the analysis, and the resolution of conflicting evidence comes together. And your goal here is to creatively interpret the lives of your ancestors while staying true to the evidence. And it's going to be beautiful. I can't wait to see your presentations come to life in the last class. And first, before we end this part of the presentation, it's okay to have gaps and uncertainties. It's normal. Even the greatest of genealogists of all time will have a gap or an uncertainty somewhere in their family tree. So don't let it throw you off course during this process. Filling in context where the sources are silent. We're looking beyond the data. The death of a loved one is more than just a date. It's a profound emotional experience. It's about understanding the lives and emotions of our ancestors, and we can achieve this with the use of oral histories and cultural context to enrich our narratives and bring our ancestors' experience to life. And I'm gonna end with, your stories are important. I'm so happy you are all taking this course. I sincerely apologize for the noise and my children interrupting. It won't happen again. How's everybody doing? Gerald, do you want to step in?
Vamos a darle, vamos a darle. Tenemos energía todito, comieron. O algunos, porque había uno que estaba cocinando. So, all right, so let me go ahead and share my screen as well. I'm going to be doing the same type of test, making sure that I'm sharing the right tab. All right. And confirmation, you guys see my screen? Okay, I see some nods. All right. So as Jasmine presented, did a really deep dive into what genealogy is, Dominican genealogy specifically, because the thing is that genealogy differs depending on the place that you do it, because the way the records are different. So I'm going to show you some examples specifically of Dominican genealogical records. And before I get into the records themselves, there are different types of records, right? We have Catholic records, which include baptisms, deaths, marriages, divorces, and acknowledgements. This ranges between 1590, un poquito después de Colón, and 1975, right? And the civil records are similar in the type of records. We have births, deaths, marriages, divorces, and acknowledgements, but the range is different. It's 1801 to about 2010. Most towns don't really start until 1870, though. Legal records, such as residency permits, there's a book called Libro de Negros Indultos and the Archivos Reales de Vallaguana, del Ceibo, de Higüey. They have a wide range as well, 1600s to the 2000s. Some records, however, especially legal records, are not yet available because there are private notary collections. There are some lawyers in DR that kind of have their records like under their arm, and they're not going to release them because it's like sometimes there's conflict with land and stuff like that, so they're being careful about that. There are personal records, right? As Jasmine highlighted with the Abuela story, your oral stories are also records, right? Especially if they're written as diaries, written accounts by family members. This category can be factual as long as it's supported by one of the above three. Like, just to give you a brief example of number 4, my family's from San Francisco de Macorís, in the northeast of the island. However, my great-grandfather is from Cuba, the Camagüey. And in order for me to connect with that side of the family, what actually helped me connect was that una prima segunda, a second cousin of my second great-grandfather, moved to New York City, and she had a diary. And that diary actually had my second great-grandfather's name with the little quotes, el ilegítimo, because there was an affair that happened in Cuba, and she had it documented, and that was really helpful in being able to dig. So oral stories are also important. Now, when we look at genealogical records, we want to target genealogically relevant information, right? In the records, we want to get the things that really add to the trees, add to the stories, and add to what we're looking for specifically here. So that's the name, right? Full name, age, occupation, where they were born. So the place of birth. In a lot of Dominican records, the wording used is natural de, right? Place of residency of both the subject and the parents is often written as residente de and vecino de. Vecino de. That's a common term in the old thing. Born in or out of wedlock, hijo legítimo. I just mentioned ilegítimo. You could probably imagine what the I means. Is to be born to married parents. However, there's a term called hijo natural. There's also a movie called Hija Natural. If you haven't seen it, it's not bad. That means to be born out of wedlock in these records. Now, another very important tidbit is permission to marry. You can see it in some documents, in these documents called dispensas. They're basically permission slips that were used to legitimize cousin marriages. Sí, nosotros hacemos eso. And now another category is status and color / race of the person. This is really more important before the end of slavery in 1822. It was much more common to see this. For example, you're going to have people labeled as libre, esclavo, or esclava. Now, for those who are enslaved, the casta or origin, which can be often referred to as criollo, if the person is born locally, right? Or ladino, if the person was raised in, right? So it's one thing to be born in, is another thing to be raised in, right? Not necessarily the same thing. You could be born in the Bronx and be raised in Chicago. So there's also, sometimes you get lucky and you can see the African ethnicity or port name, for example, Mina, Congo, Bran. Now, le voy a leer uno. I'm going to read to you guys a record. Some of you guys who grew up writing in cursive, you might appreciate some of the writing here. I grew up writing in cursive as a kid in DR. And I'm going to read you the text. So this is in Santiago de los Caballeros in the mid-1800s, and this happens to be my second great-grandparents' marriage in the church, in the Catholic Church. En la iglesia parroquial de Nuestra Señora de la Altagracia, Santiago de los Caballeros, a los 25 días del mes de junio de 1878, leídas las 3 canónicas amonestaciones en 3 días festivos. Contimas, this is in Latin, inter missarum solemna, sin resultar impedimento alguno, previo además todos los requisitos necesarios para la validez y licitud de este contrato sacramental. Yo, el infrascrito previsterio, licenciado, don Juan Luis Pérez, autorizado por el cura provisional de la parroquia, don Miguel Quesada, deposé y velé, según el ritual romano, a Manuel José J. Castellano, natural de Puerto Príncipe, Cuba. Hijo legítimo de Manuel de J. Castellanos y Dolores Benavides, con Brígida Espinal, hija legítima de Pedro Espinal y Facunda Durán, vecina de Tamboril, ambos contrayentes solteros y vecinos de esta feligresía. Fueron testigos Pedro María Cobosa y Antonio Abreu, y para constancia lo firmé, Luis Pérez. So, what we really have here is we have a lot of information in this record, right? But not all of it is genealogically relevant, right? So I'm going to use a little highlighter, como hacían antes en la pizarra ya. Here we have, you might see some purple scribbly. This is Nuestra Señora de la Altagracia en Santiago de los Caballeros. That's the city. A los 25 días, they usually write out the number. So 25 días del mes de junio, right? Don't worry, if you guys feel that this is hard to read, the more you do it, the better you get at it. De 1878. So we're talking about 1878, right? Now, from this portion, leído las canónicas, this is all more of like a Catholic ritualistic wording, right? So this is not necessarily, usually not genealogically relevant, right? So let's go all the way down to yo, el infrascrito presbiterio licenciado, here's his name, Don Juan Luis Pérez, autorizado, para que no digan nada, por el cura provisional de la parroquia, and here's his name, Don Miguel Quesada. So this is the head priest here. And the rest is what he did, right? De poseíble, según el natural, el ritual romano. And then this is really important, right? In a record, which is the name of the person. And here's the groom, Manuel José J. Castellano, natural de Puerto Príncipe. And he specifies Cuba because there's a Puerto Príncipe in Haiti. So this is a Puerto Príncipe in Cuba. And natural, right, means that he was born in, he's from this place. And then we have hijo legítimo, he's a legitimate child de Manuel de J. Castellanos. So that's his father, right? We have his father's name. Usually it's in that sequence, it's father and then mother at the time. So now we have Dolores Benavide. That is his mother. And now we have the bride, right? Con Brígida Espinal. There's an Espinal in this chat. I heard the name. So tal vez prima tuya también. Brígida Espinal. And it says hija legítima de Pedro Espinal y de Facunda Durán. Vecina de Tamboril. So this is her parents, Pedro Espinal and Facunda Durán. And she's a vecina, which means that she's a resident of Tamboril. And then it says also very important, ambos contrayentes right here, both of the people marrying are single. Because sometimes people had a second or a third or a fourth marriage. And it says, y vecinos de esta feligresía. Now you guys might think, okay, that's it, yeah, me voy para mi casa. No. The testigos can be important and the padrinos. They sometimes are relatives to the person or parents in some cases. So Pedro María Escobosa and Antonio Abreu. All right. So let me clear that up real quick, clear all that scribble. Now I'm going to show you the very same people marrying on the very same day y cuando viene a ver con el mismo calorazo de ese día, but in a civil record. Civil records are not religious. They are based on the city's archiving, and they tend to be much more detailed, right? Tend to be is a key word. So most of the time, right? Now, here we have some things that are different, right? I'm not going to go through the whole record, but I am going to, since I'm scribble happy right now, I'm going to show you guys some of the differences, right? The first thing is, yes, it's Santiago. We know that from the last record, okay? The same date, right? This is the same, right? However, we have a new piece of information. A las 7 de la noche, right? It gives you a setting, the time. A las 7 de la noche. And the person doing the marrying is different. It's Alejo Ruiz, obviously, el oficial civil. And what you have here as well as a difference is another important tidbit. I'm going to scroll all the way down. Is we have here compareció el señor Manuel José Castellano, natural de Puerto Príncipe de Cuba y residente en la sección de Tamboril de esta común. We have here his profession, profesor de escuela, his occupation. So he's a teacher, he's a school teacher, right? And we have his age. So now we know if he had ganas, and he didn't yet, probably 29. Tenía 29 años. Hijo legítimo del licenciado. Now we have the father's profession. He's a lawyer. So the groom is 29. It's 7 p.m. in Santiago. The groom is now 29, and he's a school teacher, and his father's a lawyer. So we have more detail in this record. Apologize that the one on the right-hand side I'm going to follow is smaller and harder to read, but it's such a long record, it's hard to fit it into one page to appreciate. So now we have Doña, now she has a title, Doña Dolores de Benavides, so that gives her, you know, like a sort of higher title. This is the groom's mom. And it says naturales de la misma. that means that they are also from Cuba, because it says that he is from Puerto Príncipe de Cuba. Now, another additional thing we have here is also for the groom, for the bride, Brígida. Brígida Espinal is 19. Tiene 19 años, so he's 10 years older than her officially. Here. So now we get a picture of, this kind of makes it a bit more vivid. Hija legítima, then we have the same names, Pedro Espinal y Facunda Durán. Now we have a little bit more about this couple in Tamboril, the Espinales and the Durans. It says that they are propietarios residentes en la sección de Tamboril. Sorry that I scribbled over it. But now we know that they're landowners. So the groom, school teacher, the groom's father, lawyer, and the bride, her parents are landowners in Tamboril. All right. So let's go to another. This is in the mid 1800s, by the way. Let's go to the next record. We're going to jump. No, vamos para atrás, chin. Okay. This is a little bit harder to read, right? There's a couple of gaps that are missing. Don't be intimidated by that. When things are harder to read, there's like objective reasoning that you use. For ejemplo, A, B. I'm going to show you just for fun here. You see this right here, because we're going to dig deeper into how to read this stuff and where to get it, etc. in following workshops. But A, B, R, and then an L. What month starts like that, right? Abril, right? There's no other month that starts like that, so you kind of get a gist of how that works. I'm going to read it out. En la ciudad de Santo Domingo, en 25 días del mes de abril de 1771. Yo, Antonio Bruno Campuzano, ítem cura de esta Santa Iglesia Católica, bauticé solemnemente, puse óleo y carisma a Francisco Manuel, el que nació el 3 del presente mes, hijo legítimo de Pedro Manuel Ortiz, moreno, liberto, natural de Guinea, y de Luisa de Ortiz, india natural del pueblo de Boyá. Fue su padrino, Manuel Domínguez, a quien advertí su obligación parentesco espiritual. Testigo, Domingo Fernández y Diego Morales. Fa u supra. El latín nunca falta en eso. Antonio Bruno Campuzano. Couple of things here that are going to be a little bit different from that 1800s record, right? And that is, first of all, Francisco Manuel, this is in the 1700s, right? And it says that he is the son of Pedro Manuel Ortiz. This is a term that we hear a lot in Dominican culture, in songs. Llegó el Moreno. So Moreno in this context, in most Dominican contexts, is black, right? And really nothing else. But it is usually, especially historically and legally, attached to a person when they are a free black, right? Negro tends to be attached to a person who is enslaved. Moreno is a free black. But there's a key word in his title. First, we have his color, right? Moreno, which means he's black. And then we have liberto, right? Liberto and libre are two different things. Libre means you're born free during the times of slavery. Liberto means you were liberated after you were born. And that makes sense because when we look at his precedents, natural de Guinea. So he was from Guinea. Now, a lot of you might be like, oh, the Guinea next to Senegal, tal vez. Unfortunately, in a lot of the Latin American records, Guinea has two meanings. Guinea means either born in Africa, it's a general term for Africa, or it means in the country of Guinea. We hear that in Afro-Cuban songs, Congo de Guinea soy. And then we also have this in even Haitian Creole, ne Guinéen. Right, so the word Guinea is not necessarily specific to Guinea, but it could be, right? And we have a different precedent for the mother of this child being baptized, Luisa de Ortiz, and it says India. So you might be like, India, but this is 1771. I thought that they were all gone. Tal vez no. There's a special case in this town here. It says Natural del Pueblo de Boyá. This town specifically has some of the only records of people who are registered as ethnically Indios. And not Indio like in modern times, que soy cualquiera. This is like Indio in the colonial context, which means indigenous. Now, fue su padrino Manuel Domínguez, as I said. This is important. You never know if Manuel Domínguez is related to one of them, right? So this is something to look out for. All right, let's go to the next one. Let me erase the scribble. Scribble. Mira, ahí se fue. Okay, so back to the 1800s. And now we're in a different setting. We were just at a baptism. Now we're going into a death, right? Un poquito más triste. And this death, I'm going to highlight some of the key points. This is in a different town. The last one was in the capital, in Santo Domingo. This one is in San Francisco de Macorís. And it happens in the 29th of June, 1819. This is only 3 years away from slavery, right? And I'm going to quickly annotate a very important thing here about the subject, Juana. She's 30 years old. And it says that she was a slave, right? Now, I'm going to highlight it here. It says Juana, right? This is her name. Soltera, she's single. She's 30 years old. And if we keep going down, here it says esclava. So why did I mention it's 1819? This is only 3 years away from the abolition of slavery. So she died 3 years before possibly being freed in 1822, which was the end of slavery in the colony of Santo Domingo during the Haitian Revolution. Now, an interesting tidbit about Juana, it's a little bit mysterious. She doesn't have a last name. Her last name is not Soltera. Soltera is her status. So it's in most cases, especially in the 1800s and in the late 1700s, the Catholic Church was very, very strict about making sure that even people who were enslaved got baptized, because that generates things for the Catholic Church. They needed to keep track of people. And more than anything, it's just part of the Catholic rites, right? So even the slave owner could get in trouble for not baptizing somebody who he had in his hacienda. And in this case, the guy was Pedro Tejada. He was a slave owner. And there's some interesting things that I say that she's likely not baptized. It says there's some key words that they use in some of the Catholic lingo, which is like sin oficio. It says here, I'm going to read this. Por no recibió los sacramentos, por haber muerto en el campo. Se enterró en el campo santo, en el campo santo. So like they just buried her somewhere, sin oficio. Y por ser esclava de Pedro Tejada. Y no habiendo él dispuesto, right? No last name, buried in that manner. It tells me that she was likely not born in the colony. Anybody who would have been a Creole slave born in Santo Domingo would have had a last name. For her to not have a last name, she's probably born in Africa or in another colony. And either he didn't get the chance to baptize her, or he waited too long and she passed away before she could get baptized. So this is the condition of the record. And let's clear this. All right. Now, on the topic of slavery, let's go back from the 1800s back to the 1700s. We have a really useful piece of information for our enslaved ancestors, and that is called El Libro de Negros Indultos del 1776 a 1777. This was a forced inventory by the governor of the island of irregularly acquired slaves. You might be thinking, like, how is a slave illegal? It's immoral. But to be illegal at the time, you had to not pay taxes. So some people who were slave traders, tú sabes, como hacen, it's kind of like, if you guys remember, like back in the day in the train, DVD, en los trenes, que vendían los DVDs. So this is like, you're not paying the duties to the to the crown of Spain when you're purchasing or selling a human being. And because of that, they started to notice, they were like, wait a minute, aquí como que están entrando más gente, están saliendo más gente de la que están entrando. So like on paper, the corruption was so strong, even with slavery, that they had to do a huge inventory to capture the people who were doing that. And they told the slave owners, if you don't report and we find that you have illegally acquired slaves, we're going to fine you. And if the amount is high, we're going to kick you out of the island and put you in jail. First, yo creo que eran 20 latigazos, and then kick you out of the island. So there was some severe punishment for not paying these guys their taxes. They were really serious about that. So in this case, the setting is in Santiago de los Caballeros, right? This is a little bit easier to read than some of them. In 1776, el 7 de enero. And I'm going to highlight some of the key points here. We have Don Marcos Méndez, vecino y labrador de Gurabo in Santiago. That's actually where Hipólito is from as well. And then he's saying, manifestó una negra y un negro de su habitación. So he had in his estate two blacks. One of them se llamaba Nicolás de Casta Senegal. So we have Nicholas, who is from Senegal, right? This is a very specific. This is not like Guinea. This is specific. Senegal. Como de 13 años. He was a little boy. Con una señal a fuego en el pecho derecho. You're going to see a lot of abbreviation, right? And we actually have a resource for that for you guys later that has all like the cheat sheet of abbreviations. So don't worry if you don't understand some of these now. And it says, se reguló en media pieza. That was his price at the time, right? Now we know he was 13. He was Senegalese. His name is Nicholas. Now we go to the next person on the list, and her name is Ana. And it's different things. She's a criolla ladina de Juana Méndez, casta de Senegal. This is important. So she is born in criolla ladina, raised in Juana Méndez. Juana Méndez is a place that existed in Haiti and is pronounced the same, Juana Méndez, but it's written in Creole, Ounati, por ahí que va. I don't know the exact spelling, but I did write it down on the bottom right of the sheet. Now, she's older. She's an adult. She's 20 years old, right? And the thing about her as well, it says here that it doesn't mention anything about her having any marks, right? So she has no marks. The mark, I forgot to mention, the mark that Nicholas had here, con una señal de fuego en el pecho derecho, that could be branding or it could be a tribal mark. And we find in this type of document, a lot of people had tribal marks because they were from specific African ethnicities that practice the scarring and the tattoos. And all of this stuff is documented in this type of documents, right? So I'm going to go to the next one on this very same, using the same resource, which is el libro negro de los indultos. Okay, so I'm going to summarize this one a bit because you guys got the gist of it. On the left-hand side, we're in Neiva, right? This is where they have all the uvas in DR, in Neiva. So in Neiva, here we have a man named, the owner here, his name is Teniente de la Rosa, right? And el señor Teniente de Rosa, right? And it says here that he has 3 blacks, 3 negros, sus esclavos. And we start with Antonio, right? Antonio is a 30-year-old Congo, right? So we see it right here, Antonio Casta Congo, right? He's 30. Now the next one is Cristobal, right? Cristobal is older. He's 40 years old, right? He's 40 years old here. The Casta is hard to read. Chiamba. The Chiamba people are from Ghana. They're from North Ghana. And I didn't write this one in here, but I'm going to highlight her, of course. Casilda. And she's Casta Arada. Arada is in Benin. Benin and Togo, the Fon people of Benin. Unfortunately, doesn't mention her age here, but here we have this slave owner presenting 3 people. They're from 2 different places: Congo, Ghana, and Benin, from 3 different ethnicities: Congo, Chiamba, and Arara. On the right-hand side, I know there's a few Puerto Plateños here, or Puerto Plateñas, so this is in Puerto Plata, coincidentally. And we have here, in the first one, Felipe Santana, de este vecindario, and he's presenting Elena. And she's a criolla. She's born in de las colonias francesas de esta isla. It sounds like a complicated set of words. De las colonias francesas de esta isla. All that means is Saint Domingue at the time, today Haiti. There's only one French colony in the island, and that's Haiti. So this is just like a longer wording for the same. Sometimes you'll find that people try to get fancy with the wording in some of these documents, but they have straightforward meanings. And she was 18 years old. Now, also one thing I didn't highlight here, but I'm going to highlight is y enferma. So she was sick. So also the health condition of the enslaved was also shown. Now, if we go to the next record, right? Also in Puerto Plata, we have a slave owner named Don Juan Duperon, right? Duperon might sound familiar for some of you who have done research on Gregorio Luperon, maybe connected. And he's presenting 2 blacks, 2 negros, and we have Gabriel, right? He's also a criollo like the previous Elena, but he's not from Saint Domingue. He's actually from Jamaica, criollo de Jamaica, right? And he's between 14, de 14 a 16 años, sin estampa. Usually Creole slaves didn't have any tribal marks. That was rare. It was more people who were born in Africa. And then we have next to him Miguel of the very same condition, also Jamaican, right? Maybe not a coincidence, probably came on the same ship. And he's also of a similar age. He's de 16 a 18 años, also with no marks. So this is again specifically the illegally acquired enslaved people into the colony of Santo Domingo. This does not include legally acquired people. So anybody who had been, in a family that had been enslaved for a couple of generations or was bought officially is not going to show up in this resource. Oh, and one thing, this resource is in Pares. We're going to give you guys a resource list at the end. And this one is in the Spanish archives in Sevilla. All right, so here we have a slightly different theme. This is Higüey in the 1800s, right? And these archivos reales contain a plethora of legal proceedings that include land sales, wills, inventories, slave sales, legal proceedings, and things that have to do with violence as well, right? Par de trompa, pedra, etc. All of that, when it get documented, it will be in these type of documents. So here we have the inheritance inventory of Victoria de Peña in November 25th of 1870, right? And I remember hearing Virginia talking about land. This is a document about land, but it's in the late 1800s. So about land and other inheritance as well. So in the list here, we have, some of you guys might have some of this at home, una yegua, a mare, 2 horses, right, which are 2 potros. So that's the word for like a young horse. A cow, right, una vaca parida, vale más parida. En la cadena una cadena de oro, so we have a gold chain, here, and then we get into property, right? So en los sitios y monterías de Baigua, de Anamuya, La Magdalena, a house, una casa de vivienda en el campo y una en el pueblo. So all of this property that this person is is inheriting is worth 154 pesos. Right now, you can't get a presidente grande with that money, but back then, you could get a lot of stuff with that. That was definitely worth a lot more. So how is this genealogically relevant? First of all, this adds a lot of detail about this person who is Victoria de Peña, about what she inherited. This could have set her for life, etc. But also, we see up here, this document says, de los herederos, Pedro, Sebastián, Marcelina, y Victoria Peñas. Most of the time, people inherit stuff from their parents, and it says here that she inherited por su padre, por su parte materna y materna. So we can assume that Pedro, Sebastián, and Marcelina are her siblings. So now we have siblings of this person that is inheriting that. All right, and let me bring out the eraser again. Now, this might be a more familiar setting in the streets, right? We have a fight. We have a fight between 2 women in Puerto Plata in the night. Puerto Plata, shout out. Ustedes están como medio famoso hoy. Here's a fight between 2 women in Puerto Plata in the 1900s, right? You may find signs of your ancestry, not just in your traditional life events, no nada más bautizo, marriages, deaths. You're also going to find sometimes, if they got in trouble, or they were buying land, etc., you're going to find records about them as well. So here we have the person inculpated, Felipa Alvarez, and she's an adult living in Puerto Plata. However, it says here that she is, mírala aquí, Felipa Alvarez, soltera, and she is from natural de Sabaneta de Jásica, right, which is a nice town. I've been there. Acusada de haber inferido un golpe, right? So she was accused of inflicting a slight wound. It says that further down that is slight. On la pobre Cristina Reynoso with a rock. Le dio una pedra a la pobre mujer. And that was painful enough, at least for her to go to the police and denounce it. So Felipa claims the reason, because the judge has to ask, why did you ¿Por qué tú le diste una pedra? Porque me provocó, which is kind of a typical answer you hear sometimes. So that's not good enough, right? And because it's not, it looks like she was going to get here anywhere from 6 days to a year of jail por esa pedra, right? Now, let's clear this one. Let's go to the next one. All right, so now we have something with pictures, right? And these records are special in the 1900s, right? Not everybody might trace to this because this is set up by Trujillo at the time. A lot of times copying the US style of censuses and laws and registration. And this is called a residency permit. So if you were an immigrant in the not the colony, in the country of the Dominican Republic in the 1900s, you had to re-register your residence every so often, right? And you had to pay. That's why they really want que le paguen su cuarto. So we have on the left-hand side, Teófilo Rizek, right? And this man, que es lo que le estoy diciendo, entró por Puerto Plata. Yo no lo hice a propósito, I promise you guys. Entró por Puerto Plata. Came in 18 July of 1906, and he's from where Jesus Christ is from, Nazareth, de Palestina, de Nazaret. Most people at this time would have been coming on a boat, so that makes sense. We have his age, we have his race, which is listed as Árabe, his color, white. You know, race and color are not the same thing in these type of documents. His profession, and we have more details about him, like for example, that he's a male, his weight, his height, etc. Right? And sometimes they would mention things that were visible, so we can see he's missing some hair, and it says that here. It says particulares visibles, it says calvicie, right? And from a different place, right, right next to him in the middle, we have Ernestina Gomes, right? And I saw somebody here, I heard somebody mention they were from San Pedro de Macorís. So she's from San Pedro de Macorís. I mean, a resident of San Pedro de Macorís. We see that here. She came in through San Pedro, and she's a resident of El Ingenio, Consuelo de San Pedro de Macorís. And she is coming in 1920 from St. Kitts, right? She's a bit older. Now she is 38 years old, and it says her race is black and her color is black. Profesión, oficios doméstico. A lot of women at the time, unless they were costureras, I don't know how to say that in English, where usually oficios doméstico was a common one, and for the men, it was agricultores. Now, we have a lot of detail for her as well. You know, her weight, her height, right? Estatura, her nationality. She's English officially. And you know, we have the great thing about some of these records is we see a picture of Teófilo. We also see a picture of Ernestina, right? And some of you who might have an ancestor that emigrated in this time period, you might have a picture of your grandmother when she was 25, and you might not know it. It might be in one of these records. Now, the last one we have here is Nicanor Honrado Castellanos, you know, maybe related to the Castellanos that you guys saw in the third slide, or distantly, because he's directly from Spain. The last Castellano actually was from Cuba. And he's coming in via Ciudad Trujillo. When you see that, Ciudad Trujillo was the old name for Santo Domingo, because Trujillo kind of wanted everything for himself. So Ciudad Trujillo, you know, everything is his. The race is different for him. Caucásica, color blanco. One interesting thing, if you guys notice, Teófilo is race Arab, color white. He's race Caucasian, color white. Same color, different race. So at the time, that distinction existed in the 1900s. Agricultor, like I mentioned, that's his profession, and he is from Spain. And we also see, obviously, the same detail about him here, about his height and all of that. And we have a picture of him as well. So like I said, you might have a picture of your abuelo, 25, you know, acabando todavía in one of these pictures. So let's see the next one. All right, this one is a slightly different setting, right? We're going back to the 1800s, right? And this one is called a dispensa, right? Dispensas are documents that were required for marriages that had any irregularities. The most common of which is marrying a relative. Think of it like a primos expriming permission slip, right? So you wanted to marry your cousin, la tipa, coño, está bonita. Pero es prima mía, you had to go get a permission slip, right? And this happened more often than people would think. Endogamy is something you're going to run into a lot. in Dominican genealogy and in Dominican genetic genealogy. You're gonna be like, why is he so closely related to me if he's like my third cousin? Well, maybe he's your third cousin 3 times. That happens. So in this setting, in 1901 in La Vega, we have Juan Bautista Jimenez, and he's asking for permission to marry his cousin, Gertrudis Jimenez. These documents are they use a unique method of determining relationships, which is a little bit different from your typical genealogies. Like we have here, it says, vínculo de consanguinidad en segundo grado, línea lateral. It sounds like a Super Nintendo combination, segundo grado de línea lateral. But I'll show you guys what that means in a second. We're going to have documents that talk about how to interpret that in these type of documents. These actually physically exist in La Arquidiócesis de Santo Domingo in the capital. These are not online usually. Some people have collections. I have a few of my own. Some people have collections, but you usually have to like pay a guy with a cell phone to take a picture of one of these because they're in the capital, archived. So one thing that they did after you got that permission slip, during the context of it, is they have to document how you and the prima are related, right? Because this way they could find out. Because sibling marriages were not permitted, by the way. We're not at that level. More like first cousins, the first cousins para arriba. That's how it was done. So he's here. Juan Bautista Jimenez, here is his to-be wife, Gertrudis. Her father is Eugenio. His father is Agustin. They probably play dominoes together because their father in common is Javier Jimenez. So they share a grandfather. That tells you that they're first cousins. All right, so these documents, you might run into them. They're genealogically relevant. One thing I will say again is this can be very handy when you run into a block where you might be in a town where genealogy only goes up to a certain date. Like, for example, there's towns that have a block like in 1840, 1860. If you have a block at some point, but you happen to have like a third great grandfather that married his prima, you're in luck. You might be able to find something a little bit further back. So with everything that I said and that Jasmine said, I want you guys to tell me, what is a Dominican?
This is my favorite question. And shout out to Gerald for putting together that incredible presentation. I know that it was a lot of information to take in, but it truly highlights the unique and complex nature of Dominican records.
Siempre, siempre. So I want to open it up to the floor. Que la gente me diga, what do they think? I want to hear some opinions.
I'm just gonna jump if it's okay, but I think Roberto kind of said like, "Oh, we're Caribbean," or the Caribbean is what he said, but it made me think like we're very Caribbean, and all these stories really reflect like just world history in general, like our history, or like even seeing like the guy who immigrated from Nazareth, but a lot of people who immigrated from there at that time were like escaping a lot of other stuff that was going on. So you have, you know, you can read and document on a history like, oh, you had this immigration wave from point A to point B, but that's an actual person who did move from point A to point B. Or like, you've got, sometimes like in some places, some people marry their cousin, and it's like, yeah, here's a document. Homie over here married his cousin. And sometimes people have fights in the street, and it's just like all the stories you hear that you could read are just, they seem, I think, to me like kind of abstract until you start putting actual people to them. And it's like real everyday history is just life. It's just somebody's story, and it's just kind of woven together into like this tapestry of information. And I guess this was our information.
Yeah, that's what makes up all of us.
I think something else that I get from looking at this is queda como un reguero. Like it wasn't there was some structure, but that largely it was like an unstructured affair, like where things were just happening and people were doing their best to keep up with like all of this new shit that was going on, and it's just incredible that some records exist of everything that was going on, because it seems like it was such a like anything goes type of environment that
to have any records at all seems like a blessing, you know?
For me, the records like you pointed out are either tied to religion or the economy, taxes. So I feel like, that's really what was driving kind of the social and political context of our island. But it, you know, also like the racial construct, but like even at some points the racial construct didn't matter if there was like land inherited, right? Like there was an avenue to either feel liberated or be liberated by how much you owned in either property, land, or people.
Also, I kind of just think that makes sense, like everything you said, because it's like, oh, like the religious part matters and like the tax part matters, but the formation of the state that eventually became Dominican Republic was done as a way of expanding the Catholic influence and as a way of expanding like the money that the that like Spain had. So I think it makes sense that like it just kept mattering because that's kind of all it was intended for at one point.
When I used to teach Spanish, so AP Spanish, and we used to do a family tree, and kids were traumatized many times because the homework was to get a copy of their parents' birth certificate or whatever, and then to discover that their grandparents were never married. And all of that is in a Dominican document. So it would be Maria de los Ángeles Martínez de Rodríguez. And if it doesn't have the de Rodríguez, that means that she's not married. So eventually I opted not to do it because so many kids then would go home and question their parents. And then I would get the phone calls from the parents. What are you teaching my kid?
Uncovering the secrets.
Yes.
So I have two questions. So my first question is, how do you get permission to get these legal documents, and is it hard? And then my second question is, what's the cost? Is it expensive to get these legal documents?
So I can say to answer your question. So where do you get these legal documents? A lot of them are either in El Archivo General de la Nación, so they're public property. We actually have these links at the end of the thing, so you guys are going to see it. But remember that name, Archivo General de la Nación, that has both old land stuff and new ones. There's some stuff that's private that private lawyers have that is not there. I'm not sure that you can print one of these and use it legally. You know how it is in DR. You're gonna have to go somewhere and pay for it. Like I can find you a birth certificate, but you can't use that to get a passport, right? You still have to go through the proper avenues. But they're free online to look at and download and understand and use as a reference.
Thank you.
Welcome.
One of the things that this has me thinking about, especially seeing the differentiation between raza y color, right? Because the diaspora, they love to go in on us. Okay. And I'm just like, our racial constructs and like the way that our identity is constructed is so complex. But then it's like there was a system that also explained exactly why folks tend to understand and talk about Dominican identity and how we're racialized and color and how we classify ourselves. Like this has already been in existence in a way that folks literally have in legal documentation that it's like, yes, you can be from Palestine y ser un blanco. Just like this Spaniard is a blanco too. So then it's like, even when we talk about Afro-Latinidad, that it's like, yes, this person is Black in DR. This person is also like, there's so many things that then have existed that help us understand history from a different lens. But then, like you said, I think it was Roberto, that it's like a reguero, that it's like there's just so much going on and nothing at the same time, that then it's like, okay, so where do you look? How do you also classify this information? Was it even put in the right way? And like just putting both of your presentations together for me, that it's like, okay, and what if what if my parents, could have lied? about when they were born. Or what if somebody said, espérate, you know, mommy was born on August 7th, pero vamos a decirle que fue 10 entonces. So then it's like, so what how do we know? Like all my life, my dad also had 2 birthdays. And then it's like, which one is the accurate one? Is it December? Is it November? Yo no sé. So it's like, all of it is like, yeah, just it's clear. And then at the same time, it's not, which then is why also externally people find it so hard to understand Dominicanness, and then they try to classify us within the confines of westernized ideals of identity and history that like our context just doesn't fit that, because there was so much and so many people coming in and out and so many ways of documenting that still continue to exist, that then it's like, well, yeah, there isn't one method. So it's just like a bunch of piles, like in Halloween Town. That guy who like todo lo que se perdía would go to his house. That's what it's given right now. It's like you lost your earring, it's at his house. So there's a system. It just may not make sense to everybody.
I want to second something that you just said, and it is that, and I'm going to show you guys, we have an upcoming, we have some surprises about that, the differences in how Dominicans do stuff. What I want to highlight is that it's important to always look at this context and study it thoroughly to understand it, because every place is different, and sometimes in different time periods, things are different. So even with the term Indio, there's going to be some surprises. You know, the Indio doesn't necessarily mean what the diaspora thinks it means. And there is a lot of things like that that you see, and even within Spain, like for example, if you look at a record in the 1400s of somebody enslaved in Spain, from India, it'll say, you know, Juan Negro de Calcuta. Somebody from India was seen as black in Spain in the 1400s. So everything is context, context, context. Definitely agree. Somebody else had their hand raised, I think. Se le cansó la mano.
No,
Oh.
I was going to answer a little bit of Virginia's question. So I had to get my mother's birth certificate. She is 86. So they went to La Vega, they found the birth certificate. It was illegible. It was in some book falling apart. And so we had to then make a special request para la capital for them to literally create a new birth certificate. So in my room right now, I have a file thing with a crispy new 1938 birth certificate. So that's one of the challenges, right? These papers don't last forever. There's humidity, right? And she was born in 1938, right? 86 years ago. So whatever that means for documents, and I say this because don't despair, right? There's ways to get these it's not the original, and we're just going to have to be kind of prepared for that if we're sentimental like that. But you can get the actual document that becomes a legitimate document, because we have some property things going on. And it took time. I did have to send money to DR.
I ask you, ¿cuánto te cobraron?
I don't remember. I was going to say it wasn't astronomical. It was like $50. It costs more to send it, right? To go to Western Union or
Western
whatever,
Union.
or to send it, you could send it with a relative, but it was not astronomical. It was reasonable, probably the same what it costs here to go to the records places and get a new birth certificate and all of that. So
I have a challenge in my family, my father's side of the family. He's from Tenares, and he's one of 7 siblings, and they all have the last name spelled differently on their birth certificates. So, like, yeah, so the family tree is like, my last name is Goris, but some of us have the Y, some of us have 2 R's, some of us don't have the S. And so it's like really hard to, I don't know how difficult it's going to be. I worry that that's going to make it difficult to find these records.
I can tell you that I'm a little bit familiar actually with the Gori, especially because they marry my family, the Solanos, in that same area. When you have, yeah, see what I was telling you? So I can say with the spellings, don't be one thing, don't be super strict about the spellings. What's like, for example, Goris with a Y, Goris with an I, 2 R's, no S, Castellano with an S, no S. A lot of times remember that the people writing these things were not very literate, right? So they were just literate enough to write these documents, and that's it. So ellos no sabían la diferencia, lo escribían como how they heard it. And y hay de ti if you have a French last name, olvídate, or German, or something different. Like my one of my last names is Maggi from San Francisco de Macorís. The original guy who came from Paris, Don Pierre Mailly, it was written M-A-I-S, and I got transfigured into M-A-Y-I because of the pronunciation. Mailly. Se volvió Maggi. So imagínate. There's no strictness in Dominican or most genealogy really. So don't worry, you'll find them. Nova.
Um, thank you for this, and thank you to everybody who's been sharing so far. I've been so curious, or I'm gonna be interested in like learning more about the tribal marks, I think, and how much was documented, I guess, about indigenous ancestry like before Trujillo and like the residencies, because like when I asked my bisabuela, like, they're like, she's like, oh, éramos, taíno. And I'm like, well, like how far back, or like, just kind of curious about what 3 generations ago, before like she was like 1926 or something, 1919. And there's just not like a lot of information. So I guess I'm also curious about like our like archives before colonization that might exist, that also might point to more information.
I was gonna just give you a little answer with that one. If the thing is, the subjects who are not, you have to look at it from the lens that the people colonizing prioritize their documentation most of the time, right? So when we look at really early documents in the 1500s, it doesn't even mention the women. It'll say vecinos, the heads of households. So it'll be like, oh no, aquí en Santiago hay 50 vecinos. Vecino is also a term in the time to mean the head of a household. So it'll mention the men who own land and are white, right? But if you were a free black or a free indigenous person that owned land, you could be mentioned, but as a man. So it is challenging when we get to the older periods. In the later periods, if you have an ancestor that is recorded as indigenous, you could find them. You could find information about them, but also remember, because race is a social construct, um, the way the priests recorded stuff was never consistent, or civil people. It was like they'll look at somebody, they'll be like, oh no, mira, parece un indio. Pa. Y le ponían indio. So it's not necessarily strict. They weren't like taking DNA tests or like measuring people's hair or something to like determine who they were, what they were. This is just looking at people generally, right? So there's going to be inconsistency. I found records where you have one sibling labeled as a mulatto, and then the other sibling is labeled as white, and they're siblings, the padre y madre. So it's not strict at all. But you'll definitely find some information, and as you go through the records.
Yes. So recently, like 30 years ago, my family discovered we're Sephardic Jews. And so it's been very hard for my mother's family to find information because they were hiding. They came to the Americas because they were running away from European in La Inquisición and all of that. So they were not Catholic, definitely. So they were not supposedly practicing people, but we knew they prayed in a different language. So Dominican is very all complex and complicated. And somebody was mentioning it before, how when you try to explain to non-Dominicans really all of what you are, and then they're like, really? It's all that big old question. Yes, we're all of it.
Angela, I want to say that one thing, because some people have asked me that question before. It's like, how do you find like Jewish ancestry or Sephardic Jews? And the thing is, if you don't want people to find you, it's going to be hard to find you, because the thing is, that's an identity that was prohibited by law
Yeah.
During most of the colonial period. So nobody's like, "Yo soy judío."
Sí.
Nobody's saying that ever, because that would be your head. So what you do now, where you might find somebody, right? Just a hint is, remember I said you don't always find somebody just in your regular records. Now, if you have a Jewish ancestor que le dio una pedra a una gente, or had any type of running with the law, whether that was somebody saying, "Oh, they're not eating pork," or something, then they might appear, because the only cases we have of documented Jews in the colony of Hispaniola and in other colonies like Nueva España, Mexico, is 99% of the time when they got in trouble. Pretty much. Because
It's
you're not gonna.
interesting you say that, because that's how we discovered. So one of my great grandparents or somebody got in trouble with during Horacio Vázquez porque él era uno de esos rebuseros contra el gobierno. So.
Yeah, same mismo way. Como tú dijiste, es un arroz con mango, but there's a beauty in it. We have to know the recipe, and that definitely we're complicated, but we have a structure.
Do you have any suggestions for online tools to help capture this data and start a tree?
Yes, we do. And we're actually going to share that with you right now, just because we're cutting it close to time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen of the document that I'll be sending you all via email tonight. So let's do that right now. We'll go over it very quickly. Let's see. Let me know if you can all see the screen here.
Yep.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. So here's a list of workshop tools and links for your journey, your genealogy journey with us. We'll mainly be using Family Search for this, just because that's a free resource. If you guys already have accounts with Ancestry, that's fine, but we're really going to be focusing on Family Search for this course. There's other links that you can go over that we'll be discussing in the coming weeks, as well as links to historical vital records of NYC, just in case you don't have that information of your direct relative. If you are from New York City, if you're from a different state other than New York, contact us and we'll help you find those records as well. There's links to recommended blogs and a recommended book, as well as other recommendations for websites where you can build a family tree for free, such as ancestry.com, where you can export the data. We have Family Search, which is, like I mentioned before, completely free. If you want to keep your information or your data more private, let us know. We'll send you a downloadable worksheet so that you can fill in your ancestor chart. And we have other important info for Dominican vital records, where you can order some of these records, as well as ordering historic and more recent vital records through New York City. And again, if you're in a different state, contact us and we'll help you navigate that process as well. Below that, you'll find a data record sheet. And this is to help you keep track of the data and the records that you'll come across. So you'll start with yourself for the first generation. Only put what you're comfortable with. And at the end of each generation, we're going to encourage you to put a notable ancestral story, if you have one. So it's totally up to you if you want to use this. We highly recommend it. It'll keep your information organized. You can also format it so that you can place your citations next to each piece of information that you find, however you're most comfortable. Is there any questions regarding this specific sheet?
What do you mean by what was it, like ancestral anecdote or something?
The ancestral story, like if you're looking for that specific generation. For example, generation 2 is your parents. You'll place your father's name for record keeping purposes, date of birth, birthplace, stuff like that, which will help you along your genealogical journey. And is there a notable story about them that you might want to mention in your family narrative? How did they meet? perhaps, and then you could match that with a marriage record if they were married, for example. Any other questions? How's everybody feeling?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, for our parents who become citizens here in the US, do they provide their documents?
You're talking about the Junta Central here?
Yeah, in the States, like, do they, in order to be
So I believe so, right, Gerald?
So you're saying your parents became U.S. citizens?
correct?
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, that's that stuff is online. So especially the older the person is, obviously, the more that stuff gets indexed. Family Search has some of that stuff. And there are other places where you can find it's like an application for like citizenship type of stuff.
Yeah.
You can find it. Yeah. There's definitely. And also one hint I would say is if your parents were born in the DR, you can find them in most of these resources, especially Family Search is like the #1. That's like they took pictures of everything in DR of all the records. So if they were born in the DR, you can find them in Family Search. You probably want to, at least if you're looking for that type of information.
So this information is publicly available? Like you could just get it?
It is. It is. It's publicly available. However, we're gonna go a lot. Jasmine has some really cool slides for week 2 with how to navigate, right? Because it's a little bit like, okay, como que, en un campo, como que uno, por ejemplo, si saca una yuca, you have strategy, right? So the strategy here is that you have to know how to navigate it. There's some AI into it. AI is everywhere, right? AI is not perfect. So you have to know how to like distinguish what is where, but it's definitely free and it's open, yeah. You just have to know how to dig, which will teach you.
If you have, excuse me, I know that you put some stuff for people who might be from New York. I'm pretty sure my maternal grandmother came to New York, but she was in Puerto Rico first. Do you know if it's the kind of thing where you'd have to search like Puerto Rico records, or if people who just like came to the States at any point were like, once they became New York residents, like they're just listed?
Jasmine? So I think you have some experience with that one as well.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was talking in, okay. So for Puerto Rican records, it really depends on the time period. So Puerto Rico was occupied by Spain at some point and then the United States. So the records will differ based on the time period. Now, if your grandparent migrated from Puerto Rico to New York, and it was
like DRPR New York, I think was like the trajectory.
DRPR New York, yeah. We can look at different travel documents to see if we can locate that ancestor for sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments?
This worksheet's going to get emailed to us?
Yes.
Great. This is
Yep,
exciting.
tonight. I'm going to make sure everybody gets this worksheet along with our contact information. If you have any further questions, or if there's something on this document that you think could be beneficial, or if there's something that's not on this document that you think could be beneficial on your genealogy journey, we can also assist with that as well.
This is dope. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I have a question about so like illegitimate kids and illegitimate families. I know you guys touched on it at the beginning, but thinking about like los dueños de finca que tenían la finca esa bien grande, and they had, you know, like all kinds of workers, y tenían otra familia con una de las sirvientas, you know what I mean? Like how, if at all, in your experience or your research journeys, have you found that those genealogies have or have not been kept, if that makes sense?
If you don't mind me, Jasmine, I'll answer
Go for it.
this one, because I've had a couple of cases like this. So genealogy for these type of things, the illegitimate children. First of all, we do have to say that when it's older, so like 1800s, somebody earlier talked about the Catholic framework of the colony. So things get a little more agnostic as you get into the 1900s. So when you get to like 1960, vamos a suponer que sea en la finca de un tío tuyo, whatever, in the 1900s, there's a very high chance that in that person's marriage or death, if they have passed, it'll mention the father. They're not so strict. But if it was like the 1800s, they'd be like, I know, that's not ilegítimo, so they won't say it. Pero yeah, and the other thing that can happen, right, and we'll get into that in one of the following weeks, is this is where genealogy combined with genetics, genetic genealogy, can help discover some of these things when you don't have the documentation. You might be like, wait a minute, why is this guy my brother on Ancestry? So yeah.
That's crazy. I went to a family reunion right before COVID, and like, and we've been to this finca like growing up and stuff, but we ended up meeting like 4 other sets of family that my great grandfather had in the same vicinity, and me and my cousin were like shocked of this. It was never shared. That was a thing.
Yeah, you might run into I seen a newspaper clipping of somebody in Santiago. I think he had a count of 86 children. I think along with 20 mothers. So there's some really extreme cases, and then there's hay casos un poco más controlado. But you can find them. The cool thing is that you can definitely find and this is a chance for you guys to interview your aunties. Somebody here is the auntie of the information. So interviewing people like that usually gets you, some of that information. They'll say, oh, sí, este de fulano, So.
And you know what? That's actually your homework for next week. Gather as much information you can that you already know without research, and input that information into the data record sheet. Talk to your elders if they're willing to share with you. And if somebody doesn't want to share, like don't push it. Just share what you have, and then we'll move forward with the research starting next week. Gerald, do you have the guide open for next week for the topics?
For the topics?
Mm-hmm. My computer's acting funny.
Yeah, yo estaba hablando solo. I was gonna say the instructor's guide,
Yes,
or the other one.
just to briefly touch on the topic for next week.
Oh, okay. So if you want, I can do the regular one, the copy of the generic one, right?
Yeah, we could just talk about it. You don't have to share nothing.
Okay. So it's the Exploring Genealogy Resources one, which is delving into specific resources and records, civil records, church register, immigration documents, hands-on practice with genealogy databases and archives. Identify and document at least 3 new ancestors using the resources discussed.
Some people might not be able to do that, but that's okay. We're here. That's just a goal. We're just gonna set at least 3 ancestors. If we don't achieve that, that's okay. Another thing is we're going to encourage everybody to create a family search account if you don't have one already, just because that's the platform that we'll be using moving forward.
Can you repeat that name again, please?
Familysearch.org.
I've even put in the link in there for everybody. That's where
Yeah.
You're going to be looking in there a lot. You're going
Do
to
you want to
memorize
screen share that really quick?
the page?
Yes,
Okay.
just the home page.
Yep. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Let me go back to all right. Do not get scared when you see that it says sign in and create account. You don't have to put in a credit card, it's free. So, cuando uno ve eso dice, coño, yo me voy a cobrar otra vez. So yeah, it's free. It's completely free, and they have done a great job in documenting, taking pictures of a lot of the Dominican records. It's not available for some countries, especially countries that are not compatible with the Mormon Church. They do not allow them in there. So Spain doesn't have a lot of records here, but the Dominican has. Dominican Republic has a lot of records in here. Pretty much everything. That's not everything, but a good 70%.
And maybe we should clarify real quick that Family Search is owned by LDS, aka the Mormon Church, for religious reasons.
LDS, Latter-day Saints?
Yes. So that's why you see that tab that says continue with church account. You don't have to do that. So don't worry about that.
Yeah.
¿Y cómo entraron esa gente el lío?
Ajá. Explícame.
We're thankful for whatever they did because like somebody mentioned that record that they have to reconstruct. And you might find the original in these documents. So you might find the original. They took pictures in the 80s and the 70s, in the 60s. So if it hadn't got wet yet, you might find it.
I have to come off mute just to say it because I put it in the chat. I searched up my dad. As I said, my dad is, deceased now. And I immediately found a record. So his birthday in DR is actually the December birthday. Because remember, I brought that up. It's relevant now. And he has a freaking marriage certificate with somebody who's not my mom. Oh my God.
Bueno.
Bueno.
So it's like
Prepárate.
I see you already gotten started with your homework. And then wow, I don't know, that's what I see.
I wonder if he had to do a little newspaper situation once he finally got with my mom.
Dominicans, bro. We be bugging.
And that also brings a point. Definitely, when you read these things, you're gonna find things you never knew. And that's what this, information gathering is about. And obviously you cross-reference them. I had somebody one time where I showed him that I found 2 marriage records for him. And when I showed him, he kind of started blushing around his wife. And she started like side-eyeing, and he was like, no, esa fue la de los papeles. So, and she, oh yeah, that's fulana. And then she kind of calmed down. So.
That's right, Angie. Scandalous. That comes up quite often. Quite often. So we're gonna wrap up now. Thank you guys so much for attending our first session. I'm excited for this workshop moving forward. This is something unique. I don't know if this has been done before. So I'm just super excited, and I can't wait to see everybody's project at the end of all this.
Thank you, Jasmine and Gerald. Thank you to all of you who tuned in today. We hope to see you again next week. Stay tuned for the email from Jasmine and Gerald. They're going to share the document and send you reminders for the next workshop. And I will also send a video recording of this workshop if you want to watch it again. Okay. All right, guys.
Thank you. Good
Have
night.
a good night.
Thank you, Angie.
How do you feel?
Is it still recording?